Hey everyone, okay, welcome to chapter 4 of the course where we're now going to talk about arrays in JavaScript. So this chapter is entirely dedicated to arrays. We saw arrays in chapter 1 of this course when we started to look at the primitive data types in JavaScript. So we now know there are different types of data in JavaScript. There's string, there's numbers, there's booleans, so true and false values, which we've seen many times, for example, in if statements. We've null, we've undefined, we have arrays, and a very other important data type we'll move on to in a while, which are objects in JavaScript. But for this tutorial and this chapter, we're going to focus on arrays. Now, you've seen arrays hopefully previously in this course, so this video is just going to be a reintroduction to arrays. It's going to be relatively straightforward. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an array in JavaScript. It'll just be an array of string values. So we'll do heroes from the DC universe, Superman, Wonder Woman, etc. Then we'll just log out the array. I want to show you how to access the elements in the array, and then I'm going to show you once again how a for loop works very well with an array to iterate over the elements of an array. So that's what we have to look forward to in this tutorial. Okay, awesome. So what I can do to create an array is I can say let, and I'm going to call this heroes, let heroes be equal to, and we're going to use square bracket notation. So right now I have declared an empty array. If I was to try log out the value of heroes, we're just going to get an empty array. So what we can do is we can store different elements in the array. So we'll put in Superman, Wonder Woman, we will put in Batman, Robin, and we'll put in the Flash, okay? So we now have our array of heroes. So let's just log this out to the console and see what we get. If we say console.log heroes, semicolon to end statement, what happens? And arrays are awesome, by the way. They really are, if you're ever looking to get data from like an API. So we see here we have our array. It has different elements in it. So Superman is at index 0, Wonder Woman is at index 1, etc. So the key point to note, as we've seen previously, is JavaScript is a zero-based language, and what that means basically is that JavaScript starts counting at 0. So if I wanted to log out Superman to the console, I'd have to say heroes at index 0, okay? So now that's going to give us the value of Superman. That's almost like Surferman, Superman, apologies. Okay, so if I save and refresh, we go back to the console, we get Superman. So we've seen this before, how we can access the various elements of an array. So for practice, I do want to log out a couple of them. So if if Superman is at index 0, I'm obsessed with Batman, I think the movies are great. But if Superman is at index 0, what do you think Wonder Woman's at? Well, she's at index 1, right? Because heroes at index 0 is Superman, heroes at index 1 is Wonder Woman, heroes at index 2 is Batman, heroes at index 3 is Robin, and heroes at index 4 is the Flash. So, if I was to log out heroes at index 1, that's going to give us the value of Wonder Woman, okay? So to prove that to you, if I save and refresh, we get Wonder Woman. So the key point I'm trying to emphasize is just remember, arrays start counting at 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? I lost control of the mouse a moment ago, but yeah, Batman is at index 2. He's just there by himself. So if we just say console.log heroes at index 2, we now are going to get the value of Batman. They really are great movies, by the way. I haven't watched them in a long time, though. I've watched them too many times. So I know each scene. But yeah, we have our heroes logged out. Now, another thing we can do, you might have seen it a moment ago, is if I log out, if I say console.log heroes, you'll notice once again, when I log out the array, okay, if I just expand this here, you'll notice we've access to this length property, okay? So this is really powerful because this actually allows us to iterate over an array and the various elements in an array. So hypothetically, what we could do is we could just log out to the console, heroes at index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 like we've done, I'll just do this very quickly. Okay, so if I say here is index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4, we know we're going to get Superman. I should not have deleted the code, but this is good practice. So Superman, we're going to get Wonder Woman. There's a purpose to this, by the way. Please bear with me. So we get Wonder Woman, we get Batman at index 2, we get Robin at index 3, and we get the Flash at index 4. Okay, so remember, the length property of the array is a value of 5. So we saw that, right? So if we were to say console.log the name of the array, so heroes.length, what is that going to give us? That's going to give us a value of 5. Keep that in the back of your mind, right? So this is commented out. We're not going to see this. What we're going to see is console.log heroes at index 0. So Superman, Wonder Woman at index 1, Batman index 2, Robin index 3, and the Flash index 4. So if we save and refresh, that's what we get, okay? The only thing is, we're after writing out like 5 lines of code to log out to the console each of the different elements in the array. But if you had an array that got very long, so for example, maybe an array of movies or Taylor Swift songs or stocks in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, who knows, you'd have to write out an awful lot of lines of code. And that is where and why a for loop and arrays work so well together. What we can do is we can use a for loop to iterate over the values of an array rather than saying, console.log heroes, i.e. the array name at index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's do that and just compare how long these 5 lines of code are compared to a for loop. So we've seen for loops before, so we can say for. We want to have a counter variable. We'll just use I, so we'll say let I be equal to. And what do you want to start counting at? Well, remember, heroes are array, and all arrays, they start at index 0. If you want to access the very first element of the array, you have to type out the array name at index 0, okay? So therefore, we want to start counting at 0 and not 1. So we're going to say, we're going to say for, let I be equal to 0. I'm always enthusiastic to get to the while condition of the for loop. So when do we want to run our loop? We want to run our loop while this condition evaluates to true. What condition? Well, we know we have to count from 0 to 4, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we can do is, we could say we want to run while I is basically less than 5, but didn't we just see up here how heroes.length has a value of 5? So if I was to hard code, we'll run the loop while I is less than 5. If I add other heroes to the array, like Cyborg, for example, they're not going to be included, right? Or Aquaman. So we don't want that. We want this to be dynamic. So what we can do is we can just run the loop while I is less than the array name dot length. And that's really cool because that's dynamic. In other words, if you were to add more heroes to the array, that will be accounted for in our code. And obviously, after each loop iteration, we want to increment I, our counter variable. If I was to forget to increment I, we could be in an infinite loop where just I is always 0. So we'd log out heroes at index 0 is Superman, heroes at index 0 is Superman, heroes at index 0 is Superman. We want to increment our counter variable to get to 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So therefore, we're going to say I++. So we're just going to use plus plus, the increment operator, to increment our counter variable after every loop. So here we saw, if we just log out console.log heroes at index 0, we're going to get Superman. But we don't want to log out the same index over and over. No, we want to just log out index of I. So now what's going to happen is, the first time we enter the loop, I will have a value of 0, okay? We're going to do our check. Okay, is 0 less than heroes.length? Well, 0 is less than 5. That evaluates to true. Therefore, we're just going to log out console.log heroes at index I, which will be heroes at index 0, which will be Superman. Then after the loop runs, we come up here, we add 1 to our I counter variable, I++. Therefore, I now has a value of 1, and we know that will log out heroes at index 1 is Wonder Woman. Then we add to our counter variable, so we have heroes at index 2, Batman, Robin, the flash. Remember, each time we iterate through the loop, we add to our counter variable. So if I save and refresh, what we see here is we have our heroes again, but this is written dynamically by the for loop. So this piece of code is way shorter than that piece of code. So if I delete all of this, we're still going to be able to log out our heroes to the console. Just to prove that to you. So we still get our heroes. And the great thing is, because we haven't hard-coded this to be, I is less than 5, we've said I is less than heroes.length. If we were to add another element to the array, so maybe Aquaman, whoa, that was a really bad spelling attempt. What's going to happen now is, well, there's now 6 superheroes in the array. We've got the first tree and we've got the second tree. So we got 6 in total, right? So now we're going to run while I is less than 6. So it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have to say Batman twice because the mouse didn't move. But yeah, basically, the array now, heroes.length, has a value of 6. And if we run while I is less than 6, we run from I being 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's really great. So even though we've added another element to the array, or a hero, Aquaman, if I save and refresh, because we did run the loop while I is less than heroes.length, Aquaman is added. So that's the really great thing about the for loop with arrays. You know that if you want to make sure you always get the last element of the array, just run your condition while the counter variable is less than the array name .length. So basically, we have the length property inbuilt into arrays in JavaScript, and we can just access that. Okay, I actually really enjoyed that tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, we saw how we can create an array in JavaScript. We also saw that we can access the length property of an array. We saw how we can access each individual element of an array, and how we can iterate over an array using a for loop. So even though I've only written out 3 things here, we actually learned 4 things in this tutorial, because we also were able to access the length property of the array. Okay, awesome. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I hope you learned 4 different things there. I'll see you in the next tutorial. We'll keep talking about arrays, so we're going to have a great time. I'll see you then.